It was one of those Friday evenings where everything felt heavy. Mayor Jasmine Crawford sat in her office on the 5th floor of City Hall, rubbing her temples as the last city council member finally left the room. They'd been arguing about the budget for nearly 4 hours straight. 4 hours of raised voices, political posturing, and compromise after compromise that left everyone slightly unhappy, but at least willing to move forward. She looked at her reflection in the dark window. The professional makeup was still intact, but her eyes told the real story. She was exhausted, not just physically tired, but mentally drained in that way that comes from trying to balance everyone's needs while knowing you can't possibly make everyone happy. Jasmine had been mayor for almost 2 years now. Before that, she'd built a successful software company from the ground up, sold it for a figure that still made her dizzy to think about, and then decided to do something meaningful with the platform and resources she'd earned. Politics wasn't easy, but it mattered. Still, days like this made her miss the simplicity of writing code and building products. She stood up and stretched, her back cracking in 3 places. The suit jacket came off first, draped over her chair. Then the heels, which she kicked off with genuine relief. From the small closet in her office, she pulled out her comfort clothes. A pair of well-worn jeans, a soft gray hoodie from her old company, and her favorite sneakers. This was the real her, not the polished politician in the expensive suits, but just Jasmine, a woman who wanted nothing more right now than to go home, order takeout, and watch something mindless on television. But first, she needed to pick up a gift. Her niece's birthday party was tomorrow, and she'd promised to bring something special. She'd seen the perfect item at a boutique in Riverside Heights, one of those upscale shopping districts where every store looked like it belonged in a magazine. Jasmine grabbed her keys and headed down to the private parking garage. There, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, sat her pride and joy, a bright yellow Lamborghini Huracan. She'd bought it 6 years ago, right after her company's acquisition went through. Some people bought houses or took elaborate vacations. She'd bought her dream car. People always had opinions about it. Other politicians thought it looked bad, like she was flaunting wealth while representing everyday citizens. Some community members questioned whether she understood their struggles when she drove a car worth more than most people's houses. But Jasmine had worked for everything she had. She'd grown up in a small apartment with her single mother, learned to code from library books, and built something from nothing. This car represented every late night, every rejection, every time someone told her she couldn't do something. She wasn't about to apologize for her success. The engine roared to life, that deep, powerful sound that never got old. She pulled out of the garage and into the evening traffic. The city looked different from inside the Lamborghini. People stared. They always stared. Some with admiration, some with envy, and some with something else she couldn't quite name. Suspicion, maybe. The drive to Riverside Heights took about 20 minutes. Jasmine had her window down, enjoying the cool evening air and trying to let the stress of the day blow away with it. She turned up the music, some old R&B that reminded her of summer days in her childhood. And for a few minutes she felt almost relaxed. Riverside Heights was exactly what you'd expect from a wealthy neighborhood. Pristine streets lined with boutiques, galleries, and restaurants where a single meal cost what some families spent on groceries for a week. Jasmine didn't come here often. It wasn't really her scene, but the boutique she needed was here, and she'd called ahead to make sure they had the gift wrapped and ready. She found a parking spot right on Main Street, sliding the Lamborghini between a Mercedes and a Tesla. As she turned off the engine and grabbed her phone, she noticed a few people on the sidewalk looking her way. Nothing unusual. The car attracted attention everywhere she went. What Jasmine didn't know was that one of those people was already on their phone, but not taking pictures. They were calling 911. 2 blocks away, officers Kevin Daniels and Rita Martinez were on patrol in their cruiser. They were relatively new to the force, both about 8 months in, still eager to prove themselves. The radio crackled with routine calls. A noise complaint on Oak Street. Someone's cat stuck in a tree on Maple Avenue. The usual quiet Friday evening stuff. Then came a different kind of call. Dispatch reported a suspicious person in a high-end vehicle in the Riverside Heights shopping district. The caller claimed the driver didn't match the car, suggesting possible theft or other criminal activity. Kevin, who was driving, immediately perked up. "That's right around the corner," he said to Rita. Rita nodded, already scanning the street as they approached. "What kind of vehicle are we looking for?" Dispatch said a yellow sports car, very expensive. Caller thought it might be stolen. They turned onto Main Street, and the Lamborghini was impossible to miss. Bright yellow, flashy, and with someone sitting in the driver's seat looking at their phone. Kevin pulled the cruiser up behind the Lamborghini, leaving the lights off for now. "That's got to be it," he said. From their angle, they could see the driver clearly. A black woman in casual clothes, hoodie up, focused on her phone. To them, she didn't look like someone who belonged in a car worth several $100,000. They didn't consider that successful people wore hoodies too. They didn't think about running the plates first. They didn't question whether the anonymous call might be based on bias rather than actual suspicious behavior. They just acted. Inside the Lamborghini, Jasmine was scrolling through text messages from her sister, confirming details about tomorrow's birthday party. She was so focused on her phone that she didn't notice the police cruiser pulling up behind her. She didn't see the two officers getting out and approaching her car from both sides. The first thing she heard was a sharp knock on her window, hard enough to make her jump. She looked up to find a young officer standing there, hand resting on his belt near his weapon, face set in a stern expression that immediately put her on edge. She lowered her window. "Yes, is there a problem, officer?" The officer, Kevin, didn't soften his expression. "I need you to step out of the vehicle, please." Jasmine felt her heartbeat quicken. "Why, what's going on?" "Step out of the vehicle now." His tone had shifted from request to command. On the passenger side, Rita had positioned herself with a clear view of Jasmine, also with her hand near her weapon. The body language was clear. They saw her as a threat. Jasmine's mind raced. She knew this scenario. She'd heard about it, read about it, seen the videos online, but experiencing it herself felt surreal, like watching a movie where she was somehow both the audience and the star. She slowly opened the door, moving deliberately so as not to startle either officer. "Can you tell me what this is about?" she asked, stepping out onto the sidewalk. "Whose car is this?" Kevin demanded. "It's mine," Jasmine said, keeping her voice steady despite the anxiety building in her chest. "Do you have registration and proof of ownership?" "Of course." "It's in my purse, in the car." "Can I get it?" The officers exchanged a glance. Kevin nodded slowly. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Jasmine reached back into the car, moving as if she were defusing a bomb. She grabbed her purse and pulled out her wallet, extracting her driver's license and the registration she kept tucked behind it. She handed them to Kevin, who studied them with obvious skepticism. She watched his eyes move from the documents to her face and back again, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't quite fit together in his mind. "This says the car belongs to Jasmine Crawford," he said. "That's me," she replied. "You got any other ID?" This was getting ridiculous. "That's my driver's license." "That's literally legal identification. You mind telling us what you're doing in this neighborhood?" And there it was. The question that confirmed what she'd already suspected. They didn't stop her because of actual suspicious activity. They stopped her because she didn't look like she belonged here. Because in their minds, a black woman in a hoodie couldn't possibly own a Lamborghini, couldn't possibly have legitimate business in this wealthy neighborhood. Jasmine felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced it down. Getting angry wouldn't help. "I'm shopping," she said simply. "Is that illegal?" "We received a report of a suspicious person in this vehicle." "Suspicious how?" "I'm sitting in my own car checking my phone." Rita spoke up for the first time. "Can you prove this car is actually yours?" "I just showed you the registration." "It has my name on it." "What more proof do you need?" Kevin wasn't satisfied. Something about this situation had triggered his instincts, and like many young officers, he trusted those instincts more than the evidence in front of him. "This car is worth a lot of money. You mind telling us what you do for a living?" Now Jasmine's anger broke through. "I mind very much, actually. I've provided my license and registration. I'm legally parked. I haven't committed any crime." "What exactly is the problem here?" "The problem is you're getting defensive," Kevin said, his own voice rising. "I'm getting defensive because you're harassing me for sitting in my own car." A small crowd was beginning to gather on the sidewalk. People with shopping bags stopping to watch the scene unfold. Some had their phones out already. Jasmine saw them and made a decision. She pulled out her own phone. "What are you doing?" Rita asked sharply. "I'm recording this interaction." "I have that right." "Put the phone down," Kevin ordered. "No, I'm allowed to record police officers in public. What happened next would change everything." Kevin's jaw clenched when Jasmine raised her phone. In his 8 months on the force, he'd already developed strong feelings about being recorded. His training sergeant had warned him about it, how everyone had cameras now, how you had to assume you were always being watched, but knowing something intellectually and experiencing it in the moment were two different things. I said, "Put the phone down," he repeated, his voice harder now. Jasmine held the phone steady, making sure the camera captured both officers clearly. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she kept her voice level. "I'm not doing anything illegal. Citizens have the right to record police interactions in public spaces. This was established by the courts." Rita shifted her position, moving slightly to the side. She was younger than Kevin, only 24, and this situation was making her increasingly nervous. The growing crowd, the phone cameras, the woman who seemed too confident, too knowledgeable about her rights. Something felt off, but she couldn't put her finger on what. "Ma'am, we're conducting an investigation," Rita said, trying a different approach. "We need you to cooperate." Jasmine kept her phone up but directed her words to Rita, whose tone seemed at least marginally more reasonable. "I am cooperating. I showed you my identification and registration. I answered your questions. What investigation are you conducting? What crime do you suspect me of committing?" It was a fair question, and both officers knew it. The problem was, they didn't have a good answer. An anonymous call about a suspicious person wasn't much to go on, especially when the person had provided valid identification and owned the vehicle they were sitting in. But Kevin had committed to this course of action, and in his mind, backing down now would look weak, especially with all these people watching. "We need to verify the VIN number on this vehicle," Kevin said, grasping for some procedural justification. "Make sure it matches the registration." "Fine," Jasmine said. "The VIN is visible through the windshield, and it's also on the registration I already gave you. You can verify it right now." Kevin moved toward the front of the Lamborghini, bending down to look at the VIN plate through the windshield. He pulled out the registration and compared the numbers. They matched perfectly. He walked back to Jasmine, and she could see the frustration in his face. He was looking for a reason, any reason, to justify this stop. To prove he hadn't just racially profiled someone based on an anonymous caller's bias. "How did you purchase this vehicle?" he asked. Jasmine's patience was wearing thin. "That's none of your business. It is if the vehicle was purchased with illegal funds. Are you seriously suggesting I bought my car with drug money or something?" Jasmine couldn't keep the incredulity out of her voice. "Based on what evidence?" "Based on the fact that you're being evasive and uncooperative." "I'm being evasive? I've answered every question. I've shown you my ID. I've let you verify the VIN. What more do you want?" A voice from the growing crowd called out, "Leave her alone! She hasn't done anything wrong." Kevin's head snapped toward the crowd. "Everyone needs to step back. This is police business." But the crowd wasn't stepping back. More people had stopped to watch, and several were recording on their phones now. The scene was drawing attention like a magnet. An older white man in an expensive suit pushed forward. "Officers, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sir, step back now or you'll be charged with interfering with an investigation." Kevin cut him off. Jasmine saw an opportunity. "Look, I can clear this up very quickly. I don't care who you think you are." Kevin interrupted her. "All I care about is whether this vehicle was obtained legally." "It was. I bought it 6 years ago with money I earned from selling my software company." "What software company?" "Cortex Solutions. You can look it up." Rita pulled out her phone and Kevin shot her an annoyed look. She shrugged and started typing. A moment later, her eyebrows rose slightly. "Kevin? There's a Jasmine Crawford who founded a company by that name. Sold it for a lot of money." "Let me see that," Kevin said, grabbing the phone. He looked at the screen, then at Jasmine, then back at the screen. The woman in the professional photo from the business article looked very different from the woman in front of him in the hoodie. Same face, but everything else was different. "Lots of people have the same name," he said, handing the phone back to Rita. Jasmine couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You're looking at my picture right there. Same name, same city. What more do you need?" "I need you to stop being difficult," Kevin said, his frustration boiling over. "I need you to understand that when police officers give you instructions, you follow them." "What instructions?" "You asked me to step out of the car." "I did. You asked for ID. I provided it. You asked about the VIN. We verified it. What instruction haven't I followed?" "Put the phone down." "No. That single word seemed to flip a switch. Kevin took a step closer to Jasmine, entering what any reasonable person would consider her personal space. "Put the phone down now!" Jasmine stood her ground, though her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. I'm the mayor of this city. My name is Jasmine Crawford. I was elected 2 years ago. I'm currently sitting on 3 different policy committees, including one on police reform. And what you're doing right now is exactly why we need that reform." The words hung in the air for a moment. Rita's eyes widened slightly. Kevin's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, disbelief, then something that looked almost like anger. "Right," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "And I'm the governor. Ma'am, lying to a police officer can result in additional charges." "I'm not lying," Jasmine said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "Call Police Chief Anderson. He'll confirm who I am. Better yet, call any city council member. Call anyone at City Hall. They'll all tell you the same thing." "You know what I think?" Kevin said, stepping even closer. "I think you're someone who stole or borrowed this car and decided to take it for a joyride. I think you're making up stories because you're in over your head. And I think you're about to be arrested for vehicle theft if you don't start being honest." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Several voices called out that the officers were wrong, that they should check their facts, that this was going too far. But Kevin was too focused on Jasmine, too committed to his version of events to pay attention. "I want to speak to your supervisor," Jasmine said firmly. "Right now." "You'll speak to whoever I tell you to speak to," Kevin shot back. Rita touched Kevin's arm. "Maybe we should call the sergeant." "Just to be sure." Kevin shook her off. "We don't need the sergeant. We need this woman to stop playing games." Jasmine made a decision. She lowered her phone slightly and started to reach for her purse again. "I have my City Hall credentials in here. My official mayor's identification card." "If you'll just let me. Hands where I can see them," Kevin shouted, and suddenly his hand was on his weapon. Time seemed to slow down. Jasmine froze, her hand halfway to her purse. The crowd gasped collectively. Rita looked alarmed, stepping back and putting her own hand on her weapon. "I'm just getting my ID," Jasmine said slowly, carefully. "My official government ID that proves who I am." "Step away from the vehicle," Kevin ordered. "Do it now." Jasmine took 2 steps back, her hands now raised to shoulder height, phone still in one hand. This was spiraling out of control, and she knew it. Everything she'd learned about de-escalation, everything she'd discussed in policy meetings about how police encounters could go wrong, was happening right in front of her. To her, "Please," she said, and she hated how her voice shook. "Please just verify who I am before this goes any further." "Turn around," Kevin commanded. "Put your hands behind your back." "What? Why?" "You're being detained while we investigate." "Investigate what?" "I've shown you everything you've asked for." "Turn around now or I'll turn you around." The crowd was shouting now. Someone was yelling about civil rights. Someone else was calling for the officers to check their facts. A woman in the front was crying, saying this wasn't right, that someone needed to stop this. Jasmine looked at Rita, hoping to find some sanity, some recognition that this had gone too far. Rita looked uncomfortable, uncertain, but she wasn't stopping her partner. "I'm not resisting," Jasmine said clearly, wanting it on record, wanting all those cameras to capture it. "I'm not doing anything illegal. But I'm asking you, as a citizen and as your mayor, to verify my identity before you make a mistake you can't take back." "Last warning," Kevin said. Jasmine's mind raced. What were her options? If she complied, she'd end up in handcuffs for no reason other than existing, while black in a nice car. If she didn't comply, they could claim resisting arrest and things could get even worse. She turned around slowly, keeping her hands visible. The phone was still recording, the camera now facing away from the scene, but the audio still capturing everything. "This is wrong," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "This is profiling and it's wrong, and you know it." Kevin approached from behind. She could hear his footsteps, hear the jingle of handcuffs being removed from his belt. The crowd's protests grew louder. And then Jasmine did something that would later be debated endlessly. She pulled away slightly, not running, not fighting, just stepping to the side and turning to face him. "Don't touch me," she said. "Not until you verify who I am." It was a natural human reaction. the instinct to maintain personal autonomy. But Kevin saw it as resistance. Rita saw it as non-compliance, and both of them, trained to respond to resistance with escalating force, reacted instantly. Kevin grabbed Jasmine's arm, hard enough to hurt. She gasped and tried to pull back, which he interpreted as struggling. Rita moved in from the other side, grabbing her other arm. "Let go of me," Jasmine yelled. "Stop resisting." Kevin yelled back. Everything happened so fast. One moment Jasmine was standing, trying to pull away from hands that felt like vices on her arms. The next moment, her feet were swept out from under her. She felt herself falling, unable to catch herself with her arms restrained. She hit the pavement face first. The impact knocked the wind out of Jasmine's lungs. For a moment, all she could process was pain. Her cheek had hit the concrete first, then her shoulder, her hip. The weight of two bodies pressed down on her back as Kevin and Rita worked to secure her arms behind her. The crowd erupted. People were screaming now. Someone was yelling that they were killing her. Another voice shouted to get their badge numbers. Through the chaos, Jasmine heard the distinct click of handcuffs closing around her wrists. "I can't breathe," she gasped, her face still pressed against the rough pavement. "Please, you're hurting me." Kevin had his knee on her back, using his body weight to keep her down. "Stop struggling and this will be easier." "I'm not struggling," Jasmine managed to say, though it came out more like a wheeze. "Please, I'm the mayor. Check your database. Call someone. Please." Rita, who was now standing, looked down at the woman on the ground and felt the first real stirrings of doubt. Something about this wasn't sitting right. The expensive car, the confident way the woman had spoken about her rights, the crowd's intense reaction. This didn't feel like a typical car theft scenario. "Kevin," she said quietly. "Maybe we should call for backup," Kevin cut her off. "This crowd is getting hostile." Rita hesitated, then reached for her radio. But before she could key the mic, a new voice cut through the commotion. "What in God's name is happening here?" Everyone turned to see a woman in a police sergeant's uniform striding toward them with purpose. Sergeant Linda Hayes had 22 years on the force and the kind of presence that made people automatically straighten up. She'd been 2 blocks away when she heard the commotion over the radio and decided to check it out. She pushed through the crowd, her eyes taking in the scene. The yellow Lamborghini, the crowd of angry citizens with their phones out. Her 2 rookie officers, and on the ground handcuffed a woman in a gray hoodie with blood trickling from her face. Linda's heart sank. She recognized that hoodie. More specifically, she recognized the woman wearing it. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no, no, no." She broke into a run, covering the last few yards at a sprint. "Daniels! Get off her right now." Kevin looked up, confused by the urgency in his sergeant's voice. "Sarge, we've got a stolen vehicle situation." That woman is Mayor Crawford," Linda shouted. "Get those handcuffs off her right now." The words seemed to hang in the air. Kevin's face went pale. Rita actually took a step backward, her hand flying to her mouth. The crowd, which had been yelling, suddenly went quiet, everyone wanting to hear what came next. "What?" Kevin stammered. "No, that's not." She said that, but we thought. Linda knelt beside Jasmine, her hands gentle as she helped lift some of the pressure off the mayor's back. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. We're going to get you up." "Are you injured?" Jasmine's voice was hoarse. My face hit the ground. "Kevin, unlock those cuffs now." Linda's voice carried the kind of authority that came from 2 decades of experience. Kevin's hands shook as he fumbled for his keys. It took him 2 tries to get the key in the lock. When the handcuffs finally came off, Linda helped Jasmine sit up slowly. The crowd could see her face now. Blood ran from a scrape on her cheek. Her eye was already starting to swell. Her gray hoodie had concrete dust and small pebbles stuck to it. She looked dazed, hurt, and absolutely furious. Linda pulled out her phone with one hand while keeping the other on Jasmine's shoulder to steady her. She pulled up the city website and navigated to the mayor's official page. There was Jasmine's professional photo in a navy suit smiling at the camera. Same woman, no question about it. She held the phone up to Kevin and Rita. "Do you see this? Do you see who you just tackled?" Rita was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know. We didn't know." The call said, "I don't want to hear about the call right now," Linda said sharply. She turned back to Jasmine. "Mayor Crawford, we need to get you medical attention. Can you stand?" Jasmine nodded, though the movement made her head throb. Linda and another officer from the crowd helped her to her feet. The moment she was upright, the world spun slightly. She put a hand on the Lamborghini to steady herself. The crowd's silence broke. Questions exploded from every direction. Someone demanded to know if the officers would be arrested. Someone else was already on the phone, presumably with a news station. The man in the expensive suit from earlier pushed forward. "Mayor Crawford, I tried to tell them who you were. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened." Jasmine looked at him, then at the crowd, then at the three officers. Her face, even bloodied and swelling, showed an expression of pure steel. "Sergeant Hayes," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "I want Chief Anderson here, now." "Yes, ma'am. I'm calling him right now." Linda stepped away, already dialing. Kevin and Rita stood a few feet away, looking like they wanted the ground to swallow them whole. Kevin's face had gone from pale to almost green. The reality of what they'd done was sinking in, and with it came the understanding that their careers were probably over. Jasmine turned to look at them. "Officers Daniels and Martinez," she said, her voice carrying despite the crowd noise. She'd looked at their name tags while on the ground, filing the information away even in her shock and pain. "Can you tell me what crime you suspected me of committing?" Kevin opened his mouth, but no words came out. Rita wiped her eyes and tried to speak, but only managed a choked sob. "I'll tell you what crime," Jasmine continued. "The crime of being black in a nice car. The crime of existing in a wealthy neighborhood where someone decided I didn't belong. That was my crime, wasn't it? The call?" Kevin started. "The call," Jasmine repeated. "An anonymous call from someone who saw me and decided I looked suspicious. Did you run my plates before approaching me?" Kevin's silence was answer enough. "Did you verify anything before you accused me of theft? Before you tackled me? Before you put your knee on my back while I was handcuffed and gasping for air?" A woman in the crowd started recording again, pointing her phone directly at Jasmine. Jasmine noticed and turned slightly toward the cameras. "Everyone recording this, keep recording," she said. "The world needs to see this. This is what systemic bias looks like. This is what happens when assumptions and stereotypes replace proper police work." An ambulance siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. Linda had called for one without being asked. She'd seen enough injuries in her career to know that head trauma was nothing to mess with, and the mayor had definitely hit her head. "Mayor Crawford," Linda said, returning from her call. "Chief Anderson is on his way. He's about 10 minutes out. The ambulance will be here in 2 minutes. Please let them check you out." "I don't need an ambulance," Jasmine said. "Ma'am, you're bleeding and you hit your head, please." Jasmine touched her face and looked at the blood on her fingers. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and with it came the full realization of what had just happened. She'd been tackled, handcuffed, thrown to the ground in front of dozens of witnesses, not as a criminal because she wasn't one, but because 2 officers looked at her and made assumptions based on the color of her skin. Her hands started to shake. Then her arms. Then her whole body. "I think I need to sit down," she said quietly. Linda guided her to the curb, helping her sit. Someone from the crowd ran over with a bottle of water. Someone else offered tissues. The community was rallying around their mayor, and the protective energy was palpable. The ambulance arrived, and 2 paramedics rushed over with their equipment. They knelt beside Jasmine, one of them gently examining her face while the other checked her vital signs. "That's a nasty scrape," the first paramedic said. "We should take you to the hospital, get you checked for a concussion." "I'm fine," Jasmine said, though even she didn't believe it. "Ma'am, you hit your head on concrete. That's not something to take lightly." While the paramedics worked, more people gathered. The crowd had grown from a dozen onlookers to nearly 50 people. Several news vans were pulling up, their crews jumping out with cameras and microphones. This was no longer a routine police stop gone wrong. This was a full-blown incident, and everyone knew it. A black SUV screeched to a halt behind the police cruiser, and Police Chief Tom Anderson jumped out before the vehicle had fully stopped. He was a large man, imposing in his dress uniform, but his face showed something Jasmine had never seen from him before. Genuine fear. He rushed over, taking in the scene with the practiced eye of someone who'd been in law enforcement for 30 years. Injured mayor, crying officers, huge crowd, multiple cameras. This was a disaster. "Mayor Crawford," he said, crouching down beside her. "I came as fast as I could." "What happened?" Jasmine looked at him, and he could see the anger burning in her eyes despite the injury and the shock. "What happened," she said slowly, "is that 2 of your officers racially profiled me, accused me of stealing my own car, refused to verify my identity, and then assaulted me when I tried to assert my rights. That's what happened, Chief. Tom looked at Kevin and Rita, who both looked like they wanted to disappear. Then he looked at Linda, who nodded grimly to confirm the mayor's account. Get them out of here, he said to Linda. Back to the station. Don't let them talk to anyone. Not the press, not other officers, no one. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Linda said. She gestured to Kevin and Rita. You two in your cruiser now. We'll discuss this at the station. As the two officers walked toward their vehicle, heads down, the crowd booed. Someone threw a plastic bottle that bounced off the cruiser's hood. The anger was real and it was growing. Tom turned back to Jasmine. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. This should never have happened. You're right, Jasmine said. It shouldn't have. But it did. And you know what the worst part is, Chief? I've been pushing for police reform for 2 years. 2 years of meetings, of trying to implement better training, of trying to address implicit bias. And your union has fought me every step of the way. They've called my proposals unnecessary. They've said there's no systemic problem. Well, Chief, I'm the mayor of this city, and your officers just treated me like a criminal because of the color of my skin. If it can happen to me, what's happening to people who don't have my platform? The paramedics wanted to take Jasmine to the hospital, but she refused. She knew what she needed to do, and she needed to do it now, while the cameras were rolling and the crowd was watching. This moment was bigger than her injuries. This was a moment that could change things. She stood up slowly, waving off the hands that reached to help her. Her face throbbed. Her shoulder ached. But her mind was crystal clear. I need to make a statement, she said to Chief Anderson. Mayor Crawford, maybe you should rest first. Get medical attention. We can schedule a press conference. No, Jasmine cut him off. Not a scheduled press conference where everything is cleaned up and scripted. Right here, right now, while my face is still bleeding, while people can see exactly what happened. Tom looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better. He stepped back, and Jasmine turned to face the crowd and the cameras. The news crews rushed forward, shoving microphones toward her. Someone counted down, and suddenly she was live on multiple news channels. In the background, she could see people in the crowd holding up their phones, streaming this to social media. Good. The more people who saw this, the better. My name is Jasmine Crawford, she began, her voice strong despite the pain. I am the mayor of this city. Approximately 30 minutes ago, I was pulled over by 2 police officers while sitting in my legally owned vehicle in a public parking space. I was accused of stealing that vehicle based on an anonymous call that claimed I looked suspicious. She paused, letting that sink in. A reporter opened her mouth to ask a question, but Jasmine held up a hand. I provided my driver's license and vehicle registration. I answered every question posed to me. I explained who I was. I offered to show additional identification. None of that mattered. When I attempted to exercise my legal right to record the interaction, I was threatened. When I asked to speak to a supervisor, I was ignored. And when I made the mistake of asserting my autonomy over my own body, I was tackled to the ground, handcuffed, and held down while I struggled to breathe. She touched her face, her fingers coming away with fresh blood. She held her hand up to the cameras. This is what systemic racism looks like. This is what implicit bias leads to. I am a successful businesswoman. I am the mayor of this city. I dress casually on Friday evenings like millions of Americans. I drive a nice car that I bought with money I earned. And none of that protected me from being profiled, accused, and brutalized. The crowd behind the cameras was silent now, hanging on every word. Jasmine could see people crying. She could see anger on faces. She could see recognition, that look that said, this could have been me. For 2 years, I have been working to reform our police department. I have proposed mandatory de-escalation training. I have suggested implicit bias workshops. I have advocated for community oversight boards. And at every turn, I have been told these measures are unnecessary, that our officers are well trained, that there is no systemic problem. She looked directly at the camera and threw it to everyone watching. If this can happen to the mayor, what is happening to ordinary citizens who don't have my platform? How many people have been profiled, harassed, or worse, simply because someone decided they looked out of place? How many anonymous calls have led to unnecessary confrontations because officers failed to verify basic facts before acting on assumptions? A reporter finally managed to get a question in. Mayor Crawford, what do you want to see happen to the officers involved? I want accountability, Jasmine said immediately. Real accountability, not paid administrative leave followed by a return to duty. I want a full investigation, not by the police department investigating itself, but by an independent body. I want to know who made that anonymous call and whether they've made similar calls in the past. I want to know why these officers didn't run my plates before approaching me. I want to know why they didn't verify my identity before escalating to physical force. Another reporter spoke up. Do you think this incident was racially motivated? Jasmine's laugh was bitter. What do you think? A black woman in a luxury car gets a call made about her being suspicious. Officers assume she's a criminal despite providing valid identification. They don't believe her when she tells them who she is. They physically assault her rather than take 30 seconds to verify her story. Yes, this was racially motivated. Maybe not consciously. Maybe these officers don't think of themselves as racist, but the impact is the same. What's your message to the community? Another reporter asked. Jasmine took a deep breath. This was important. She needed to get this right. My message is that I see you. I believe you. Every person who has ever been followed in a store, questioned in their own neighborhood, pulled over for no reason, told they don't belong somewhere. I believe your stories because I just lived one. And I promise you I will use this platform, this terrible experience, to push harder than ever for real change. She turned slightly, addressing Chief Anderson directly even though the cameras were still rolling. Chief, I will be calling an emergency city council meeting. We will be discussing immediate reforms, community oversight with real power, body cameras that can't be turned off, mandatory bias training with regular refreshers, consequences for officers who abuse their authority, and we will be reviewing every policy and procedure to ensure this never happens again. Tom's face was carefully neutral, but Jasmine could see the tension in his jaw. He nodded slowly. Whatever you need, Mayor. What I need is change, Chief, real change. Not promises or half measures. Jasmine turned back to the cameras one more time. To everyone watching, I want you to record this. Share it, talk about it. This is not just my story. This is the story of countless people who have experienced similar treatment, but didn't have the platform to make people listen. I'm going to use my platform now, and I'm going to make sure this conversation continues until we see real reform. With that, she waved off the reporter's continuing questions and walked back to her car. The yellow Lamborghini sat there, a symbol of success that had somehow become evidence of suspicion. She ran her hand along the hood, collecting her thoughts. Linda approached carefully. Mayor, are you sure you should be driving? You hit your head pretty hard. I'm fine, Sergeant Hayes. Thank you for intervening when you did. Linda's face showed pain and regret. I should have been there sooner. If I had known, you weren't the one who made assumptions. You weren't the one who refused to verify facts. You're not the problem here, Sergeant. Linda nodded, but Jasmine could see she still felt responsible somehow. Jasmine reached out and touched her arm. I mean it. You did what you could when you got there. That matters. Jasmine got into her car and the engine roared to life. As she pulled away from the curb, she looked in her rearview mirror. The crowd was still there. The cameras were still rolling. Chief Anderson stood with his arms crossed, looking defeated. The whole scene looked surreal in the fading evening light. By the time Jasmine made it home, her phone had exploded. Hundreds of text messages, dozens of missed calls, emails flooding her inbox. She scrolled through them as she sat in her driveway. City council members expressing shock and support. Community leaders demanding action. Even the governor had sent a message saying she was ready to help however needed. And the video, multiple videos actually, from different angles, all showing the same scene. Her on the ground, officers on top of her, her face hitting the pavement. They were spreading across social media faster than she could track. By the time she got inside her house, the first video had over 1 million views. By the time she showered and changed, carefully avoiding looking at her injured face in the mirror, it was approaching 5 million. The story was everywhere. National news picked it up. Mayor assaulted by police officers read one headline. City mayor profiled, tackled while checking phone in her own car read another. Opinion pieces were already being written. Hashtags were trending. The whole country was watching what would happen next. Jasmine's sister called hysterical. Are you okay? I saw the video. Oh my God, Jazz, I saw them throw you down. I'm okay, Jasmine said, though her voice cracked on the words. Shaken up, but okay. You need to sue them. You need to press charges. I need to change things, Jasmine interrupted. Personal revenge isn't the point. Systemic change is the point. But even as she said it, Jasmine felt the weight of everything settling on her shoulders. She ended the call with her sister and sat in her living room, finally alone with her thoughts. The adrenaline was completely gone now, replaced by exhaustion and, surprisingly, grief. She'd known intellectually that racial profiling happened. She'd read the statistics, heard the stories, worked on policies to address it. But experiencing it herself had cracked something open inside her. The helplessness of being judged and found wanting based on nothing but appearance. The fear of being physically overpowered by people with legal authority to use force. The humiliation of being treated like a criminal in front of dozens of witnesses. She let herself cry. Not the angry tears from earlier, but deep, shuddering sobs that came from somewhere primal. She cried for herself. She cried for everyone this had happened to who didn't have her resources or platform. She cried for the systemic failures that made this kind of thing routine rather than exceptional. Her phone rang again. This time it was her deputy mayor, calling about the emergency council meeting. "We've scheduled it for Monday morning," he said. "Every council member has confirmed they'll be there. The press is already asking for access." "Open session," Jasmine said immediately. "I want everyone to see this. No closed doors, no private deliberations. Everything out in the open." "Jazz, are you sure? These things can get heated, and with emotions this high, I'm sure. The public deserves to see their government working. Or failing to work if that's what happens." Over the weekend, the story continued to dominate news cycles. Video compilations appeared showing Jasmine's press conference intercut with footage of the actual incident. Analysis pieces examined the failures in police procedure. Civil rights organizations issued statements. The police union released a defensive statement saying they needed to wait for all facts before rushing to judgment, which only made people angrier. Protests organized spontaneously. By Saturday afternoon, hundreds of people had gathered at City Hall with signs demanding justice and reform. By Sunday, that number had grown to thousands. The protests were peaceful but passionate. People shared their own stories of being profiled. They chanted for change. They demanded accountability. Someone had also done research on the anonymous caller. It turned out to be a prominent resident of Riverside Heights named Victoria Ashton, a woman with a history of complaints about suspicious people in her neighborhood. A local journalist pulled records showing she'd made 17 similar calls in the past 3 years, all about people of color who she claimed didn't belong in the area. When confronted by reporters, Victoria tried to defend herself. "I was just trying to keep my neighborhood safe," she said. "How was I supposed to know she was the mayor? She looked like she didn't belong in that car." The interview went viral for all the wrong reasons. People dissected every word, pointing out the coded language and underlying assumptions. Victoria became the face of exactly the kind of bias Jasmine had been talking about. Within days, her social media accounts were flooded with criticism. Her country club quietly asked her to resign her membership. Even her neighbors started avoiding her. But the real focus remained on the police department and what would happen to Officers Daniels and Martinez. Speculation ran rampant. Some thought they'd be fired immediately. Others predicted they'd get a slap on the wrist and return to duty. Jasmine refused to comment on what she thought should happen, saying only that she wanted the process to be fair and transparent. Monday morning arrived with a tension that seemed to hang over the entire city. The emergency city council meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock, but people started lining up outside City Hall at 6. By the time the doors opened, there were over 300 people waiting to get in. The council chambers could only hold about 150, so overflow rooms were set up with video feeds. Jasmine arrived early, moving through a side entrance to avoid the media circus at the front. She'd spent an hour that morning covering the bruise on her face with makeup, but there was only so much concealer could do. The scrape was healing but still visible, and her eye remained slightly swollen. She'd considered leaving it exposed to make a point, but decided that professionalism mattered. She wanted people focused on her words and her proposals, not just her injuries. The council chambers filled quickly. Jasmine recognized many faces from the weekend protests. She also saw police union representatives taking seats in the back, their expressions guarded. Chief Anderson sat in the front row, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Several local news crews had cameras set up, and she knew this was being live-streamed to thousands of viewers. Council President Walter Chen called the meeting to order at exactly 9 o'clock. The usual procedural items were dispensed with quickly. Everyone knew why they were really there. Mayor Crawford has called this emergency session to address the incident that occurred this past Friday and to propose policy reforms, Walter said. Mayor, the floor is yours. Jasmine stood and walked to the podium. For a moment, she just looked out at the crowd. She saw anger, hope, pain, and expectation written on different faces. She saw people who looked like her, people who'd probably had their own encounters with profiling. She saw older white couples who looked uncomfortable but were listening. She saw young people with phones ready to record every word. Thank you all for being here, she began. I want to start by acknowledging that what happened to me is not unique. It's not special. The only difference between my experience and the experiences of countless others in this city and across this country is that I have a platform. I have power. I have resources. And I intend to use all three to make sure this kind of incident becomes harder and harder to occur. She pulled out a thick folder of documents and placed it on the podium. This is a comprehensive police reform package that I'm presenting to this council today. It's built on months of research, consultations with civil rights experts, community feedback, and yes, my personal experience from Friday evening. I'm not asking for these reforms. I'm demanding them. A murmur ran through the crowd. Council members sat up straighter. This wasn't the usual political language of suggestions and considerations. This was direct action. First, Jasmine continued, mandatory body cameras for all uniformed officers, with strict penalties for officers who deactivate them or fail to record interactions with the public. These cameras will be on from the moment an officer begins their shift until the moment it ends. The footage will be stored independently and accessible to civilian oversight. She saw the police union representatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Second, the creation of a civilian oversight board with real power. Not an advisory board, not a toothless committee. A board that can investigate complaints, subpoena records, and recommend disciplinary action up to and including termination. Half of this board will be elected by the community. The other half will be appointed by this council with community input. Council member Patricia Rodriguez raised her hand. Mayor, the police union has historically opposed civilian oversight. How do you propose we implement this? Jasmine's smile was tight. The police union works for the people of this city, not the other way around. If they oppose measures that increase accountability and transparency, then they're welcome to take their concerns to the voters. But we are not asking for permission. We are implementing necessary reforms. The crowd applauded. The police union representatives sat stone-faced. Third, Jasmine went on, mandatory implicit bias training every 6 months for all officers. Not the checkbox training that many departments do, but intensive evidence-based programs that actually work to identify and address unconscious prejudices. Officers who refuse this training or fail to demonstrate progress will not be allowed to continue in positions of public contact. She flipped through her papers. Fourth, a complete review of how we respond to anonymous calls about suspicious persons. From now on, dispatch will be required to ask specific questions. What crime is being committed? What specific behavior is suspicious? Can you identify yourself as the caller? Anonymous calls about someone simply existing in a space will not be treated as